Slovenia. Officially, the Republic of Slovenia is a country in southern Central Europe. Slovenia is bordered by Italy to the west, Austria to the north, Hungary to the northeast, Croatia to the south and southeast, and a short coastline within the Adriatic Sea to the southwest. Slovenia is partially situated on the Balkan Peninsula and is mostly mountainous and forested. It covers 20,271 square kilometers, and has a population of approximately 2.1 million. Slovene is the official language. Slovenia has a predominantly temperate continental climate, with the exception of the Slovene littoral and the Julian Alps. Ljubljana, the capital and largest city of Slovenia, is geographically situated near the center of the country. Other larger urban centers are Maribor, Kranj, Celje, and Koper. Slovenia's territory has been part of many different states: the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Carolingian Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, the Kingdom of Hungary, the Republic of Venice, the Illyrian provinces of Napoleon's First French Empire, the Austrian Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In October 1918, the Slovenes co-founded the state of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs. In December 1918, they merged with the Kingdom of Montenegro and the Kingdom of Serbia into the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. During World War II, Germany, Italy, and Hungary occupied and annexed Slovenia, with a tiny area transferred to the independent state of Croatia, a newly declared Nazi puppet state. In 1945, it again became part of Yugoslavia. Post-war, Yugoslavia was allied with the Eastern Bloc, but after the Tito-Stalin split of 1948, it never subscribed to the Warsaw Pact, and in 1961 it became one of the founders of the non-aligned movement. In June 1991, Slovenia declared independence from Yugoslavia and became an independent sovereign state. Slovenia is a developed country, with a high-income economy ranking highly in the Human Development Index. The Gini coefficient rates its income inequality among the lowest in the world. It is a member of the United Nations, the European Union, the Eurozone, the Schengen area, the OSCE, the OECD, the Council of Europe, and NATO. Slovenia was ranked 33rd in the Global Innovation Index in 2023. History. Present-day Slovenia has been inhabited since prehistoric times. There is evidence of human habitation from around 250,000 years ago. A pierced cave bare bone, found in 1995 in Divjbabe Cave near Cerno, is considered a kind of flute, and possibly the oldest musical instrument discovered in the world. In the 1920s and 1930s, artifacts belonging to the Cro-Magnon, such as pierced bones, bone points, and a needle were found by archaeologist Srečko Brodar in Potok Cave. In 2002, remains of pile dwellings over 4,500 years old were discovered in the Ljubljana Marsh, now protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, along with the Ljubljana Marsh's wooden wheel, the oldest wooden wheel in the world. It shows that wooden wheels appeared almost simultaneously in Mesopotamia and Europe. In the transition period between the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, the Urnfield culture flourished. Archaeological remains dating from the Hallstatt period have been found, particularly in southeastern Slovenia, among them a number of Sichulas in Novo Mesto, the town of Sichulas. Roman era. The area that is present-day Slovenia was in Roman times shared between Venetia et Histria and the provinces Pannonia and Noricum. The Romans established posts at Emina, Poetavio, and Celia, and constructed trade and military roads that ran across Slovene territory from Italy to Pannonia. In the 5th and 6th centuries, the area was subject to invasions by the Huns and Germanic tribes during their incursions into Italy. A part of the inner state was protected with a defensive line of towers and walls called Claustra Alpium Iuliarum. A crucial battle between Theodosius I and Eugenius took place in the Vipava Valley in 394. The Slavic tribes migrated to the Alpine area after the westward departure of the Lombards in 568, and, under pressure from Avars, established a Slavic settlement in the eastern Alps. From 623 to 624 or possibly 626 onwards, King Samo united the Alpine and Western Slavs against the Avars and Germanic peoples and established what is referred to as Samo's kingdom. After its disintegration following Samo's death in 658 or 659, the ancestors of the Slovenes located in present-day Carinthia formed the independent Duchy of Carantania, and Carniola, later Duchy Carniola. Other parts of present-day Slovenia were again ruled by Avars before Charlemagne's victory over them in 803. Middle Ages. The Carantanians, one of the ancestral groups of the modern Slovenes, particularly the Carinthian Slovenes, were the first Slavic people to accept Christianity. They were mostly Christianized by Irish missionaries, among them Modestus, known as the Apostle of Carantanians. This process, together with the Christianization of the Bavarians, was later described in the memorandum known as the Convertio Bagoriorum et Carantanorum, which is thought to have overemphasized the role of the Church of Salzburg in the Christianization process over similar efforts of the Patriarchate of Aquileia. In the mid-8th century, Carantania became a vassal duchy under the rule of the Bavarians, who began spreading Christianity. 3 decades later, the Carantanians were incorporated, together with the Bavarians, into the Carolingian Empire. During the same period Carniola, too, came under the Franks, and was Christianized from Aquileia. Following the anti-Frankish rebellion of Liudwit at the beginning of the 9th century, the Franks removed the Carantanian princes, replacing them with their own border dukes. Consequently, the Frankish feudal system reached the Slovene territory. After the victory of Emperor Otto I over the Magyars in 955, Slovene territory was divided into a number of border regions of the Holy Roman Empire. Carantania was elevated into the Duchy of Carinthia in 976. By the 11th century, the Germanization of what is now Lower Austria, effectively isolated the Slovene inhabited territory from the other Western Slavs, speeding up the development of the Slavs of Carantania and of Carniola into an independent Carantanian Carniolan Slovene ethnic group. By the High Middle Ages, the historic provinces of Carniola, Styria, Carinthia, Gorizia, Trieste, and Istria developed from the border regions and were incorporated into the medieval Holy Roman Empire. The consolidation and formation of these historical lands took place in a long period between the 11th and 14th centuries, and were led by a number of important feudal families, such as the Dukes of Spanheim, the Counts of Gorizia, the Counts of Celje, and, finally, the House of Habsburg. In a parallel process, an intensive Germanization significantly diminished the extent of Slovene-speaking areas. By the 15th century, the Slovene ethnic territory was reduced to its present size. In 1335, Henry of Gorizia, Duke of Carinthia, Landgrave of Carniola and Count of Tyrol died without a male heir. His daughter Margaret was able to keep the county of Tyrol, while the Wittelsbach Emperor Louis IV passed Carinthia and Carniolan marched to the Habsburg Duke Albert II of Austria, whose mother, Elizabeth of Carinthia, is a sister of the late Duke Henry of Gorizia. Therefore, most of the territory of present-day Slovenia became a hereditary land of the Habsburg monarchy. As with the other component parts of the Habsburg monarchy, Carinthia and Carniola remained a semi-autonomous state with its own constitutional structure for a long time. The Counts of Celje, a feudal family from this area who in 1436 acquired the title of state princes, were Habsburg's powerful competitors for some time. This large dynasty, important at a European political level, had its seat in Slovene territory but died out in 1456. Its numerous large estates subsequently became the property of the Habsburgs, who retained control of the area right up until the beginning of the 20th century. Patria del Friuli ruled present western Slovenia until Venetian takeover in 1420. At the end of the Middle Ages, the Slovene lands suffered a serious economic and demographic setback because of the Turkish raids. In 1515, a peasant revolt spread across nearly the whole Slovene territory. In 1572 and 1573 the Croatian-Slovenian peasant revolt wrought havoc throughout the wider region. Such uprisings, which often met with bloody defeats, continued throughout the 17th century. Early modern period. After the dissolution of the Republic of Venice in 1797, the Venetian Slovenia was passed to the Austrian Empire. The Slovene lands were part of the French-administered Illyrian provinces established by Napoleon, the Austrian Empire and Austria-Hungary. Slovenes inhabited most of Carniola, the southern part of the duchies of Carinthia and Styria, the northern and eastern areas of the Austrian littoral, as well as Prekmurje in the Kingdom of Hungary. Industrialization was accompanied by construction of railroads to link cities and markets, but the urbanization was limited. Due to limited opportunities, between 1880 and 1910 there was extensive emigration. Around 300,000 Slovenes emigrated to other countries, mostly to the US, but also to South America, Germany, Egypt, and to larger cities in Austria-Hungary, especially Vienna and Graz. Despite this emigration, the population of Slovenia increased significantly. Literacy was exceptionally high, at 80%. The 19th century also saw a revival of culture in Slovene, accompanied by a romantic nationalist quest for cultural and political autonomy. The idea of a united Slovenia, first advanced during the revolutions of 1848, became the common platform of most Slovenian parties and political movements in Austria-Hungary. During the same period, Yugoslavism, an ideology stressing the unity of all South Slavic peoples, spread as a reaction to pan-German nationalism and Italian irredentism. World War I. World War I brought heavy casualties to Slovenes, particularly the 12 battles of the Isonzo, which took place in present-day Slovenia's western border area with Italy. Hundreds of thousands of Slovene conscripts were drafted into the Austro-Hungarian army, and over 30,000 of them died. Hundreds of thousands of Slovenes from princely county of Gorizia and Gradiška were resettled in refugee camps in Italy and Austria. While the refugees in Austria received decent treatment, the Slovene refugees in Italian camps were treated as state enemies, and several thousand died of malnutrition and diseases between 1915 and 1918. Entire areas of the Slovene littoral were destroyed. The Treaty of Rapallo of 1920 left approximately 327,000 out of the total population of 1.3 million Slovenes in Italy. After the fascists took power in Italy, they were subjected to a policy of violent fascist Italianization. This caused the mass emigration of Slovenes, especially the middle class, from the Slovene littoral and Trieste to Yugoslavia and South America. Those who remained organized several connected networks of both passive and armed resistance. The best known was the militant anti-fascist organization TIGR, formed in 1927 to fight fascist oppression of the Slovene and Croat populations in the Julian March. Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. The Slovene People's Party launched a movement for self-determination, demanding the creation of a semi-independent South Slavic state under Habsburg rule. the proposal was picked up by most Slovene parties, and a mass mobilization of Slovene civil society, known as the Declaration Movement, followed. This demand was rejected by the Austrian political elites, but following the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the aftermath of the First World War, the National Council of Slovenes, Croats and Serbs took power in Zagreb on October 6, 1918. On October 29, independence was declared by a national gathering in Ljubljana, and by the Croatian parliament, declaring the establishment of the new state of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs. On December 1, 1918, the state of Slovenes, Croats and Serbs merged with Serbia, becoming part of the new Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. In 1929 it was renamed the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. The main territory of Slovenia, being the most industrialized and westernized compared to other less developed parts of Yugoslavia, became the main center of industrial production, compared to Serbia. For example, Slovenian industrial production was 4 times greater, and it was 22 times greater than in North Macedonia. The interwar period brought further industrialization in Slovenia, with rapid economic growth in the 1920s, followed by a relatively successful economic adjustment to the 1929 economic crisis and Great Depression. Following a plebiscite in October 1920, the Slovene-speaking southern Carinthia was ceded to Austria. With the Treaty of Trianon, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was awarded the mostly Slovene-inhabited Prekmurje region, formerly part of Austria-Hungary. Slovenes living in territories that fell under the rule of the neighboring states Italy, Austria, and Hungary were subjected to assimilation. World War II. During World War II, Nazi Germany and Hungary annexed northern areas, while Fascist Italy annexed the vertically hatched Black area. Some villages were incorporated into the independent state of Croatia. After 1943, Germany also occupied the area that Italy had annexed. Slovenia was the only present-day European nation that was trisected and completely annexed into both Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy during World War II. In addition, the Prekmurje region in the east was annexed to Hungary, and some villages in the lower Sava Valley were incorporated in the newly created Nazi puppet independent state of Croatia. Axis forces invaded Yugoslavia in April 1941 and defeated the country in a few weeks. The southern part, including Ljubljana, was annexed to Italy, while the Nazis took over the northern and eastern parts of the country. The Nazis had a plan of ethnic cleansing of these areas, and they resettled or expelled the local Slovene civilian population to the puppet states of Nedica Serbia and Ndh. In addition, some 46,000 Slovenes were expelled to Germany, including children who were separated from their parents and allocated to German families. At the same time, the ethnic Germans in the Gotski enclave in the Italian annexation zone were resettled to the Nazi-controlled areas, cleansed of their Slovene population. Around 30,000 to 40,000 Slovene men were drafted to the German army and sent to the Eastern Front. Slovene was banned from education, and its use in public life was limited. In south-central Slovenia, annexed by Fascist Italy and renamed the province of Ljubljana, the Slovenian National Liberation Front was organized in April 1941. Led by the Communist Party, it formed the Slovene partisan units as part of the Yugoslav partisans led by the communist leader Josip Broz Tito. After the resistance started in summer 1941, Italian violence against the Slovene civilian population escalated. The Italian authorities deported some 25,000 people to concentration camps, which equaled 7.5% of the population of their occupation zone. The most infamous ones were Rab and Gonars. To counter the communist-led insurgents, the Italians sponsored local anti-guerrilla units, formed mostly by the local conservative Catholic Slovene population that resented the revolutionary violence of the partisans. After the Italian armistice of September 1943, the Germans took over both the province of Ljubljana and the Slovenian littoral, incorporating them into what was known as the Operation Zone of Adriatic Coastal Region. They united the Slovene anti-communist counterinsurgents into the Slovene Home Guard and appointed a puppet regime in the province of Ljubljana. The anti-Nazi resistance, however, expanded, creating its own administrative structures as the basis for Slovene statehood within a new, federal, and socialist Yugoslavia. In 1945, Yugoslavia was liberated by the partisan resistance and soon became a socialist federation known as the People's Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The first Slovenian republic, named Federal Slovenia, was a constituent republic of the Yugoslavian Federation, led by its own pro-communist leadership. Approximately 8% of the Slovene population died during World War II. The small Jewish community, mostly in the Prekmurje region, perished in 1944 in the Holocaust of Hungarian Jews. The German-speaking minority, amounting to 2.5% of the Slovenian population prior to the war, was either expelled or killed in the aftermath of the war. Hundreds of Istrian Italians and Slovenes that opposed communism were killed in the Foibe massacres, and more than 25,000 fled or were expelled from Slovenian Istria. Around 130,000 persons, mostly political and military opponents, were executed in May and June 1945. Socialism. During the re-establishment of Yugoslavia in World War II, the first Slovenian Republic, Federal Slovenia, was created and it became part of Federal Yugoslavia. It was a socialist state, but because of the Tito-Stalin split in 1948, economic and personal freedoms were much broader than in the Eastern Bloc countries. In 1947, the Slovene littoral and the western half of Inner Carniola, which had been annexed by Italy after World War I, were annexed to Slovenia. After the failure of forced collectivization that was attempted from 1949 to 1953, a policy of gradual economic liberalization, known as workers' self-management, was introduced under the advice and supervision of the Slovene Marxist theoretician and communist leader Edvard Kardelj, the main ideologue of the Titoist path to socialism. Suspected opponents of this policy both from within and outside the Communist Party were persecuted and thousands were sent to Goli Otok. The late 1950s saw a policy of liberalization in the cultural sphere as well, and unlimited border crossing into Western countries was allowed, both for Yugoslav citizens and for foreigners. In 1956, Josip Broz Tito, together with other leaders, founded the non-aligned movement. In the 1950s, Slovenia's economy developed rapidly and was strongly industrialized. With further economic decentralization of Yugoslavia in 1965–66, Slovenia's domestic product was 2.5 times the average of Yugoslav republics. While a communist country, after the Tito-Stalin split Yugoslavia initiated a period of military neutrality and non-alignment. Jat Yugoslav Airlines was the flag carrier and during its existence it grew to become one of the leading airlines in Europe both by fleet and destinations. By the 1970s more airlines were created including Slovenian Adria Airways mostly focused in the growing tourist industry. Until the 1980s, Slovenia enjoyed relatively broad autonomy within the federation. It was the most liberal communist state in Europe, and the passport of the Yugoslavia Federation allowed Yugoslavians to travel to the most world countries of any socialist country during the Cold War. Many people worked in Western countries, which reduced unemployment in their home country. Opposition to the regime was mostly limited to intellectual and literary circles and became especially vocal after Tito's death in 1980 when the economic and political situation in Yugoslavia became very strained. Political disputes around economic measures were echoed in the public sentiment, as many Slovenians felt they were being economically exploited, having to sustain an expensive and inefficient federal administration. Slovenian Spring, Democracy and Independence. In 1987 a group of intellectuals demanded Slovene independence in the 57th edition of the magazine Nova Revija. Demands for democratization and more Slovenian independence were sparked off a mass democratic movement, coordinated by the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, pushed the communists in the direction of democratic reforms. In September 1989, numerous constitutional amendments were passed to introduce parliamentary democracy to Slovenia. On March 7, 1990, the Slovenian Assembly changed the official name of the state to the Republic of Slovenia. In April 1990, the first democratic election in Slovenia took place, and the united opposition movement Demos led by Jožpetnik emerged victorious. The initial revolutionary events in Slovenia predated the revolutions of 1989 in Eastern Europe by almost a year, but went largely unnoticed by international observers. On December 23, 1990, more than 88% of the electorate voted for a sovereign and independent Slovenia. On June 25, 1991, Slovenia became independent. On June 27 in the early morning, the Yugoslav People's Army dispatched its forces to prevent further measures for the establishment of a new country, which led to the 10-day war. On July 7, the Brijuni Agreement was signed, implementing a truce and a 3-month halt of the enforcement of Slovenia's independence. At the end of the month, the last soldiers of the Yugoslav army left Slovenia. In December 1991, a new constitution was adopted, followed in 1992 by the laws on denationalization and privatization. The members of the European Union recognized Slovenia as an independent state on January 15, 1992, and the United Nations accepted it as a member on May 22, 1992. Slovenia joined the European Union on May 1, 2004. Slovenia has one commissioner in the European Commission, and 7 Slovene parliamentarians were elected to the European Parliament at elections on June 13, 2004. In 2004 Slovenia also joined NATO. Slovenia subsequently succeeded in meeting the Maastricht criteria and joined the Eurozone on January 1, 2007. It was the first post-communist country to hold the presidency of the Council of the European Union, for the first 6 months of 2008. On July 21, 2010, it became a member of the OECD. The disillusionment with domestic socio-economic elites at municipal and national levels was expressed at the 2012 to 2013 Slovenian protests on a wider scale than in the smaller October 15, 2011 protests. In relation to the leading politicians' response to allegations made by the Official Commission for the Prevention of Corruption of the Republic of Slovenia, legal experts expressed the need for changes in the system that would limit political arbitrariness. Geography. Slovenia is in Central Europe touching the Alps and bordering the Mediterranean Sea. At the regional conference in Prague in 1994, the International Geographical Union placed Slovenia among the 9 Central European countries. The 15th meridian east almost corresponds to the middle line of the country in the direction west-east. 4 major European geographic regions meet in Slovenia: the Alps, the Dinarides, the Pannonian Plain, and the Mediterranean Sea. Although on the shore of the Adriatic Sea near the Mediterranean Sea, most of Slovenia is in the Black Sea drainage basin. The Alps, including the Julian Alps, the Kamnik-Savinjia Alps and the Karawang chain, as well as the Pohorji Massif, dominate northern Slovenia along its long border with Austria. Slovenia's Adriatic coastline stretches approximately 47 kilometers from Italy to Croatia. The term karst topography refers to that of southwestern Slovenia's karst plateau, a limestone region of underground rivers, gorges, and caves, between Ljubljana and the Mediterranean Sea. On the Pannonian Plain to the east and northeast, toward the Croatian and Hungarian borders, the landscape is essentially flat. However, most of Slovenia is hilly or mountainous, with around 90% of its land surface 200 m or more above sea level. More than half of Slovenia, which is 11,823 square kilometers or 4,565 square miles, is forested, ranking it third in Europe, by percentage of area forested, after Finland and Sweden. The areas are covered mostly by beech, fir beech and beech oak forests and have a relatively high production capacity. Remnants of primeval forests are still to be found, the largest in the Kosevje area. Grassland covers 5,593 square kilometers and fields and gardens. There are 363 square kilometers of orchards and 216 square kilometers of vineyards. Government and politics. Slovenia is a parliamentary democracy republic with a multi-party system. The head of state is the president, who is elected by popular vote and has an important integrative role. The president is elected for 5 years and at maximum for 2 consecutive terms. The president has a representative role and is the commander-in-chief of the Slovenian Armed Forces. The executive and administrative authority in Slovenia is held by the Government of Slovenia, headed by the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers or Cabinet, who are elected by the National Assembly. The legislative authority is held by the bicameral Parliament of Slovenia, characterized by an asymmetric duality. The bulk of power is concentrated in the National Assembly, which consists of 90 members. Of those, 88 are elected by all the citizens in a system of proportional representation, whereas 2 are elected by the registered members of the autochthonous Hungarian and Italian minorities. Elections take place every 4 years. The National Council, consisting of 40 members, appointed to represent social, economic, professional, and local interest groups, has a limited advisory and control power. The 1992 to 2004 period was marked by the rule of the liberal democracy of Slovenia, which was responsible for gradual transition from the tightwast economy to the capitalist market economy. It later attracted much criticism by neoliberal economists, who demanded a less gradual approach. The party's president Jana Drnovšek, who served as prime minister between 1992 and 2002, was one of the most influential Slovenian politicians of the 1990s, alongside President Milan Kukan, who served between 1990 and 2002. The 2005 to 2008 period was characterized by over-enthusiasm after joining the EU. During the first term of Jana Janša's government, for the first time after independence, the Slovenian banks saw their loan deposit ratios veering out of control. There was overborrowing from foreign banks and then overcrediting of customers, including local business magnates. After the onset of the Great Recession and European sovereign debt crisis, the left-wing coalition that replaced Janša's government in the 2008 elections, had to face the consequences of the 2005 to 2008 overborrowing. Attempts to implement reforms that would help economic recovery were met by student protesters, led by a student who later became a member of Jana Janša's SDS, and by the trade unions. The proposed reforms were postponed in a referendum. The left-wing government was ousted with a vote of no confidence. In March 2020, Jana Janša became prime minister for third time in the new coalition government of SDS, the Modern Centre Party, New Slovenia, and Pensioners Party. Jana Janša was known as a right-wing populist and a supporter of former US President Donald Trump and right-wing Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary. In April 2022, liberal opposition, the Freedom Movement, won the parliamentary election. The Freedom Movement won 35% of the vote, compared with 23% for Janša Slovenian Democratic Party. On May 25, 2022, Slovenia's parliament voted to appoint the leader of Freedom Movement, Robert Golob, as the new Prime Minister of Slovenia. Economy. Slovenia has a developed economy and is the richest Slavic country by GDP per capita. Slovenia is also among the top global economies in terms of human capital. It is the most developed transition country with an old mining industrial tradition, chemical industry, and developed service activities. Slovenia was in the beginning of 2007 the first new member to introduce the euro as its currency, replacing the thaler. Since 2010, it has been member of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. There is a big difference in prosperity between the various regions. The economically wealthiest regions are the Central Slovenia region, which includes the capital Ljubljana and the Western Slovenian regions, while the least wealthy regions are the Mura, Central Sava, and Littoral, Inner Carniola statistical regions. In 2004-06, the economy grew on average by nearly 5% a year in Slovenia. In 2007, it expanded by almost 7%. The growth surge was fueled by debt, particularly among firms, and especially in construction. The Great Recession and European sovereign debt crisis had a significant impact on the domestic economy. The construction industry was severely hit in 2010 and 2011. In 2009, Slovenian GDP per capita shrank by 8%, the biggest decline in the European Union after the Baltic countries and Finland. An increasing burden for the Slovenian economy has been its rapidly aging population. In August 2012, the year-on-year contraction was 0.8%, however, 0.2% growth was recorded in the first quarter in relation to the quarter before, after data was adjusted according to season and working days. Year-on-year contraction has been attributed to the fall in domestic consumption and the slowdown in export growth. The decrease in domestic consumption has been attributed to the fiscal austerity, to the freeze on budget expenditure in the final months of 2011, to the failure of the efforts to implement economic reforms, to inappropriate financing, and to the decrease in exports. Due to the effects of the crisis, it was expected that several banks had to be bailed out by EU funds in 2013, however, needed capital was able to be covered by the country's own funds. Fiscal actions and legislations aiming on the reduction of spendings as well as several privatizations supported an economic recovery as from 2014. The real economic growth rate was at 2.5% in 2016 and accelerated to 5% in 2017. The construction sector has seen a recent increase, and the tourism industry is expected to have continuous rising numbers. Since 2017, Slovenia has experienced moderate economic growth, with GDP growth averaging around 2% per year between 2017 and 2019. However, like many other countries, Slovenia's economy has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, with a contraction of around 5% in 2020. Overall, Slovenia's economy is relatively small but open and has shown resilience in recent years. Slovenia's manufacturing sector is one of the largest contributors to the country's economy, accounting for around 25% of GDP. The country has a strong tradition in manufacturing, particularly in the areas of automotive and electrical engineering. Other important sectors include services, which account for around 65% of GDP, and agriculture, forestry, and fishing, which account for around 2% of GDP. Slovenia is a highly export-oriented economy, with exports accounting for around 80% of GDP. The country's main export partners are other European countries, particularly Germany, Italy, and Austria. Key exports include machinery and transport equipment, manufactured goods, and chemicals. The government of Slovenia has implemented a range of policies aimed at promoting economic growth and development. These include efforts to attract foreign investment, reduce red tape, and increase investment in research and development. The country has also introduced reforms aimed at improving the efficiency of its labor market and increasing the flexibility of its economy. The government's approach to consulting business associations has been noted by the European Commission as a good practice example. Languages. The official language in Slovenia is Slovene, which is a member of the South Slavic language group. In 2002, Slovene was the native language of around 88% of Slovenia's population according to the census, with more than 92% of the Slovenian population speaking it in their home environment. This statistic ranks Slovenia among the most homogeneous countries in the EU in terms of the share of speakers of the predominant mother tongue. Slovene is a highly diverse Slavic language in terms of dialects, with different degrees of mutual intelligibility. Accounts of the number of dialects range from as few as 7 dialects, often considered dialect groups or dialect bases that are further subdivided into as many as 50 dialects. Other sources characterize the number of dialects as 9 or as 8. Hungarian and Italian, spoken by the respective minorities, enjoy the status of official languages in the ethnically mixed regions along the Hungarian and Italian borders, to the extent that even the passports issued in those areas are bilingual. In 2002 around 0.2% of the Slovenian population spoke Italian and around 0.4% spoke Hungarian as their native language. Hungarian is co-official with Slovene in 30 settlements in 5 municipalities whereof 3 are officially bilingual. Italian is co-official with Slovene in 25 settlements in 4 municipalities. Romani, spoken in 2002 as the native language by 0.2% of people, is a legally protected language in Slovenia. Romani speakers mainly belong to the geographically dispersed and marginalized Roma community. German, which used to be the largest minority language in Slovenia prior to World War II, around 4% of the population in 1921, is now the native language of only around 0.08% of the population, the majority of whom are more than 60 years old. Gotscherisch or Granisch, the traditional German dialect of Gotschee County, faces extinction. A significant number of people in Slovenia speak a variant of Serbo-Croatian as their native language. These are mostly families who moved to Slovenia from other former Yugoslav republics. Altogether, Serbo-Croatian in its different forms is the second natively spoken language in Slovenia with 5.9% of population. In 2002, 0.4% of the Slovenian population declared themselves to be native speakers of Albanian and 0.2% native speakers of Macedonian. Czech, the fourth largest minority language in Slovenia prior to World War II after German, Hungarian, and Serbo-Croatian, is now the native language of a few hundred residents of Slovenia. Slovenia ranks among the top European countries in knowledge of foreign languages. The most taught foreign languages are English, German, Italian, French and Spanish. As of 2007, 92% of the population between the age of 25 and 64 spoke at least one foreign language and around 72% of them spoke at least 2 foreign languages, which was the highest percentage in the European Union. According to the Eurobarometer survey, as of 2005 the majority of Slovenes could speak Croatian and English. A reported 42% of Slovenes could speak German, which was one of the highest percentages outside German-speaking countries. Italian is widely spoken on the Slovenian coast and in some other areas of the Slovene littoral. Around 15% of Slovenians can speak Italian, which is the third highest percentage in the European Union, after Italy and Malta. Religion. Before World War II, 97% of the Slovenian population identified as members of the Catholic Church in the country, around 2.5% as Lutheran, and around 0.5% of residents identified themselves as members of other denominations. After 1945, the country underwent a process of gradual but steady secularization. After a decade of persecution of religions, the communist regime adopted a policy of relative tolerance towards churches. After 1990, the Catholic Church regained some of its former influence, but Slovenia remains a largely secularized society. The 2018 Eurobarometer data shows 73.4% of population identifying as Catholic, that fell to 72% in the 2019 Eurobarometer survey. According to the Catholic Church data, the Catholic population fell from 78% in 2009 to 72% in 2019. The vast majority of Slovenian Catholics belong to the Latin Church. A small number of Eastern Catholics live in the White Carniola region. Despite a relatively small number of Protestants, the Protestant legacy is historically significant given that the Slovene standard language and Slovene literature were established by the Protestant Reformation. Primož Trubar, a theologian in the Lutheran tradition, was one of the most influential Protestant reformers in Slovenia. Protestantism was extinguished in the Counter-Reformation implemented by the Habsburg dynasty, which controlled the region. It only survived in the easternmost regions due to protection of Hungarian nobles, who often happened to be Calvinists themselves. Today, a significant Lutheran minority lives in the easternmost region of Prekmurje, where they represent around a fifth of the population and are headed by a bishop with the seat in Murska Sobota. The third largest denomination, with around 2.2% of the population, is the Eastern Orthodox Church, with most adherents belonging to the Serbian Orthodox Church while a minority belongs to the Macedonian and other Eastern Orthodox churches. According to the 2002 census, Islam is the second largest religious denomination in the country, with around 2.5% of the population. Most Slovenian Muslims came from Bosnia. Slovenia has long been home to a Jewish community. Despite the losses suffered during the Holocaust, Judaism still numbers a few hundred adherents, mostly living in Ljubljana, site of the sole remaining active synagogue in the country. In the 2002, around 10% of Slovenes declared themselves atheists, another 10% professed no specific denomination, and around 16% declined to answer. According to the Eurobarometer poll 2010, 32% of Slovenian citizens believe there is a God, whereas 36% believe there is some sort of spirit or life force and 26% do not believe there is any sort of spirit, God, or life force. Heritage. Slovenia's architectural heritage includes 2,500 churches, 1,000 castles, ruins, and manor houses, farmhouses, and special structures for drying hay, called hay racks. 4 natural and cultural sites in Slovenia are on the UNESCO World Heritage Site list. Skokjan Caves and its karst landscape are a protected site as the old forests in the area of Gatinski Sneznik and Kosevski Raj in the SE Slovenia. The Idrija mercury mining site is of world importance, as are the prehistoric pile dwellings in the Ljubljana marsh. The most picturesque church for photographers is the medieval and Baroque building on Bled Island. Near Postojna there is a fortress called Prejama Castle, half hidden in a cave. Museums in Ljubljana and elsewhere feature unique items such as the controversial Divjbabe flute, and the oldest wheel in the world. Ljubljana has medieval, Baroque, Art Nouveau, and modern architecture. The architect Plečnik's architecture and his innovative paths and bridges along the Ljubljanica are notable and on UNESCO tentative list. Cuisine. Slovenian cuisine is a mixture of Central European cuisine, especially Austrian and Hungarian, Mediterranean cuisine and Balkan cuisine. Historically, Slovenian cuisine was divided into town, farmhouse, cottage, castle, parsonage, and monastic cuisines. Due to the variety of Slovenian cultural and natural landscapes, there are more than 40 distinct regional cuisines. Ethnologically, the most characteristic Slovene dishes were one-pot dishes, such as ricet, Istrian stew, minestrone, and zganci buckwheat spoon bread. In the Prekmurje region there is also bujatari pa, and Prekmurska giba nica pastry. Prosciutto is a delicacy of the Slovene littoral. The potica has become a symbol of Slovenia, especially among the Slovene diaspora in the United States. Soups were added to the traditional one-pot meals and various kinds of porridge and stew only in relatively recent history. Each year since 2000, the Roasted Potato Festival has been organized by the Society for the Recognition of Roasted Potatoes as a distinct dish. Roasted potatoes, which have been traditionally served in most Slovenian families only on Sundays, have been depicted on a special edition of Postmarks by the Post of Slovenia in 2012. The best-known sausage is Kranjska klobasa. Slovenia is also the home of the world's oldest vine, which is 400 years old. Slovenia has been awarded the European Region of Gastronomy title for the year 2021.